Is it consistent with that? Joining us from Philadelphia, ritual murder expert and author of Investigating Religious Terrorism and Ritualistic Crimes, Dawn Perlmutter is with us. In Jacksonville, Alabama, forensic death investigator, professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, and host of the incredibly popular Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan. And in Pensacola, Florida, private investigator Lauren Vellucci is with us. Great to see everyone tonight. Thank you for being here. Dawn, I'll begin with you. Based upon what we are learning from the defense here, does this strike you as a ritualistic murder scene?
Well, I just have to emphasize that I did not observe any of the photos. I only have the information that I read and the descriptions. But I can tell you from what I've read, this is a classic ritual murder. I've worked on dozens of these types of homicide cases. Ritual homicide involves acts that go beyond the actions necessary to conduct the crime or elude the police. This is not a counter-forensic measure. You don't do all of that just to hide the body. It has all of the elements. It has symbols at the scene. What you're not taking into account when they're looking at the shapes of these branches. And by the way, ritualistic crimes are typically outdoor crime scenes because they're nature-based ideologies. But when you're looking at the symbols, you need to account for the shape of the body underneath it when you're interpreting it. You're not just looking at the sticks. It can be the entire thing, and it has meaning to whoever did it. I really do not think it's random. The other thing is obviously the cause of death is significant. In ritualistic crimes, you do not get gunshots. They're always typically knife wounds, and there's always things that are done with the blood. And in this case, obviously a secondary scene, but blood, whether it's blood spatter or what was on the tree, it seems that this was not random at all. Body positioning is very significant. And as I said, it will have some meaning to the person who did it. In terms of Odinism, which I'm very familiar with, it would be consistent with racist Odinism, which is very popular, has been popular among neo-Nazi skinheads and prison gangs since the late 90s. In fact, there's many groups right now that are taking it to the next level. We have a blood tribe leader who has runes tattooed on his face that translate to son of Wotan, which is one of the also known as Odinism. So to me,
so based upon what the defense is saying here, you think there's something to it. And again, you prefaced it all by saying you haven't seen the actual photos. None of us have. Joseph Scott Morgan. Let's start first with the bodies. Does that appear posed the way it's described? Does it appear that someone could be murdered or dragged and naturally end up that way? And what are your thoughts about the blood and lack of blood in parts of this scene?
Again, without having access to the imagery, it's very difficult for me to opine about this. Positionality is everything, whether it's some kind of ritualistic event, and even when we work cases involving serialized perpetrators, they have a ritual in and of themselves. They have a rich fantasy life as well. If they're acting out, they can pose bodies. I worked a series of homicides where bodies were posed in kind of Leonardo da Vinci's classic anatomical man position. And you also have this issue that's really significant to me, that is undressing and redressing, which is something that's quite striking to me that came out. But that's the scene as far as I can understand it at this point. I don't know that that this is necessarily randomized, but if this is the coverage that is on top of these bodies, it would seem to me that it was a very poor effort to obscure the bodies, because that's the goal with covering bodies, right? You want them out of sight. We don't know how robust any of the vegetation was. We don't know how fresh the vegetation was, and it's very troubling to me, Vin, that these items were not collected, specifically as it applies to tool marks. They were not collected in the beginning, because we're talking about saw marks, bolt cutters, perhaps. I don't know. How were these limbs, if they are in fact limbs, how were they trimmed away? Because that's a big telltale there. You're leaving money on the ground there from an evidentiary standpoint. Why would you not collect it at that point in time? I don't understand that.
Lauren Vellucci, what questions do you have based upon what the defense has now filed in court? What questions does that raise for you as an investigator?
I agree with JSM. I mean, I think it's appalling that they didn't take the sticks as evidence. Judging from the height of the girls, these sticks had to be decent size. So were they skinny little sticks that they could have easily broken? It seems more logical that they were long, the size of them, because some of them were the length of the bodies of the girls. So therefore, again, how would they have caught them? It's very troubling. That piece of information that you guys just brought out blows my mind. And from an investigation standpoint, it's appalling.
So, Dawn, as we try to get to the truth of what happened here, people involved in a ritualistic killing, would it just be a one-off? Like, let's say there's a group of Odinists who are practicing and doing sacrifices or rituals like this. Would there be more bodies? Because this goes back all the way to 2017, and we have heard nothing about other victims in this area.
Well, you'd have to know what type of ritual. Again, if it's not somebody connected to one of these organized ideologies, it could be something they're just inventing in their mind. But it could also be, you don't know if it's an initiation, if it's sacrificial. There's a lot of different types of rituals that are done.
Well, let me lay this out. Let me lay this out, though, Dawn, because here's what the defense is saying. The defense is saying one of these girls has a mom who would date interracially. So that was the motivation behind all of this. This is part of their theory. And it's this group that is, practicing Odinism. And this is why they attacked these particular girls. I mean, that's part of what they're laying out there as potentially what happened here. Does it make it less plausible that there haven't been other attacks in the area? Like a group, would they just kind of go after one particular victim and one off and that's it? We don't see bodies all over the place?
No, that it's quite possible and plausible. I mean, there are groups like this that not only ritually murder, they ritually rape women. They're active. They could be doing it in other places. I guess what I'm trying to say is this does happen, as bizarre as it sounds. There are ritual murders, and a lot of these racist Odinists are growing. They are recruiting, and they're part of this like warrior tribal. They identify with that ideology. So it's very plausible, and I think again, this is without seeing any of the not seeing other evidence. It is plausible to me.
Okay, fair enough. Our guests are great. They're staying with us. When we come back, we're going to ask this question: was this a one-man job? Could one person have done all of this